Hello and welcome to a brand new episode. You're listening to the Totally Indian Football Show with me, your host Siju, and I have once again a gentleman joining us from Japan. The last time we had one was Mr. Tom Bayer, but today I am ecstatic to have one more gentleman joining all the way from Japan, Mr. Richard Allen. He is currently the role that he plays over there is as a senior football executive and technical advisor of Yokohama FC, one of the teams that playing in the J League. Richard, thank you so much for taking time and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, so let's get to business then. Starting off, you just don't play this role. I will come to the role that you play for Yokohama a little later on the show, but let's start with something probably would excite all of us is that you're also part of the FIFA Global Football Development Department, which is led by Mr. Arsene Wenger, and you play the high performance specialist role. So let's begin by asking you if you could tell us briefly what is this team and what is this development department that's run by Mr. Wenger?
Well, I think the kind of key to this is around the talent development scheme, which has been introduced by FIFA, and really that's an attempt, I guess, to increase competitiveness both in the men's and women's game. You're probably aware that, especially within the men's game, it's pretty dominated by Europe and some South America, obviously. I think ranking 1 and 2 at the world at the moment is Argentina and Brazil, and obviously Argentina winning the World Cup. But if you look kind of over history, world football is pretty dominated by, one confederation, which is Europe. And although this is not trying to dumb things down, it's trying to make sure that we give every talent a chance, which is one of the catchphrases that we use, but really trying to bring the levels up so that it's more competitive across the globe. So helping member associations to become more competitive.
Right, and you play the role as high performance specialist. Now, I think the term high performance is all thrown around by everyone, especially these days in football or in sport, rather. If I had to ask you before asking the role that you play, how do you define high performance? What is high performance according to you?
Yeah, and I'm one of many. So we have many high performance specialists across the globe supporting this program. And some people will have some very specific kind of specialisms. Some will be quite generalist, but all highly experienced people, men and women, that have been involved with the game for a number of years. So I guess if you look at where high performance sits, I mean, football can be divided, I suppose, into a number of different sections. One of them is around grassroots participation and development. And the other is where we talk about high performance. So whether that's within professional football, international football, it's kind of that top end, that more competitive end of the scale, which, is dependent upon a number of different factors, whether that's performance support or playing opportunities or coaching opportunities and coach education. There's a whole range of different factors that will help develop young players and help to develop those national associations. So the job of a high performance specialist is support that program with member associations.
Right, and which are the countries that you are closely working with?
Well, I'm currently working with Hong Kong. So Hong Kong, both the men's and the women's, trying to support them, help them. I've also been in Australia helping a colleague with Soccer Australia, but my other specialism is around talent identification. So my background has been within talent ID. So I kind of lead on that for the project. So therefore I get involved in lots of other things, whether they're technical leadership programs or whether they're working with other specialists who perhaps are in country and that's a particular issue that they want some help with. We're also doing a pilot scheme with some FIFA talent coaches. So I've been supporting that program as well. So at the moment, I'm only doing one MA on my own, one member association, which is Hong Kong. But hopefully I'll do a few more as we go on.
Right. And is there anything that you can tell us more about, your association and the work that you've done with Hong Kong? Because I feel like we've fallen into the Asian belt and being from India, I'm sure we are all wanting to see what the other countries in the Asian belt are also doing. So if you can share some, how have they done well or, what's happening there and someone who's you've closely working with them. So
Yeah, I suppose within this region, obviously working in Japan as well, and I've done some work separately with the JFA. I think what you have, like most places, is every country is very different. The talent development scheme has come out of an ecosystem analysis that was carried out over the last couple of years, where a real deep analysis of a number of countries was carried out. And I think what that told us was every country is very different. There are some things that are similar. The challenges that a place like Hong Kong perhaps would have is how do they get more training and playing time? You know, they've got limited access to facilities because it's only a small country. So they don't have many pitches, which means that they perhaps don't have as many opportunities for their men and women, boys and girls to actually train. They don't have many opportunities for them to play enough games, I guess. So, you know, and it's a very small country, so it's probably not comparable to India, which obviously is a huge country. And part of this program is how do we link up countries that have similar issues? And because FIFA is worldwide, it means that we can look and say, well, actually, some of the stuff that Japan's going through is similar to what's going on in Finland around coach education. Well, let's link up Finland and Japan. We're not just having to link up people within their own confederations. So, you know, Hong Kong is very willing to really work very hard to improve what they're doing because they want to be competing at a high level and they want their ranking to go up and they want to qualify for competitions and be challenging. So yeah, they're very committed to this program and hopefully FIFA can help them to achieve what they want to achieve. And it looks very different when you go to somewhere like Australia, which perhaps is a huge landmass, you know, maybe population wise, you know, not as big as some countries, but a big landmass. And they have their own particular issues which they have to face. And, you know, like many countries where perhaps there are other sports that are equally as important. You know, I come from England where football is the number one sport. Yes, we have cricket and rugby, but fundamentally football is the number one sport. Other countries are competing with others and culturally perhaps they are not kind of as aligned to football as others. But so I think, you know, Japan obviously had a very good World Cup and that's great. I think their women's team is very competitive and hopefully will do well this year's World Cup in Australia. So yeah, every country has its own issues and different contexts.
Well, the points that you shared are pretty interesting. I think one that really sticks with me was the fact that you said you kind of group the countries with who face similar kind of challenges and not necessarily that they're part of the same confederation. So that's something very interesting to probably also to know that you can work outside of your confederation as well. Now coming to the point, I just want to understand, you work with Hong Kong closely at this point, but you're placed in Japan, or you have other work commitments and you travel around. So, is there a liaison that who are the team that you closely work with in Hong Kong? I'm sure someone locally helps you with certain things, and how does the process go about?
Yeah, so I would work directly with a technical director in Hong Kong, and as part of this program, he would have formed a kind of almost like a project group which would include himself and other people that, would be able to help the program, whether it's head of women's football or whether it's head of coach education, a variety of different people. And I will meet those online. I've been out to Hong Kong. I would have sat down and met with them and gone through a whole range of different activities. I would have met with their CEO, with their chairman. And it's really important that, these programs have support of the people at the top. Yes, great that the technical director is driving this, and it's not me or FIFA driving this. This is very much driven by people within country. We also have regional technical consultants FIFA have that work within the region. So I work very closely with our RTC, Mike Wong, who has a very good knowledge of every Asian country. I think he's knows everybody, and so therefore, I would speak to him on a regular basis so that I kind of get a firm understanding. But yeah, I spent 4 or 5 days before Christmas in Hong Kong, and that was the kind of the initial visit, which kind of was the first kind of moment that I was able to spend time with them directly and get to know them and kind of understand where they wanted to go. And my job very much is to support them and help. Again, this is not FIFA coming in telling them what to do. This has to be driven by them, and that's the approach that we're taking.
Right. And, coming to the point that, the reason I'm sure you're also looking closely at what India is doing with regards to the football. And I believe that you've visited India, I think, if I'm not wrong, for the Under 17 Women's World Cup. And in the recent updates that we have a new regime on board and they've laid out some vision, I think part of while they were doing the launch, they mentioned that Mr. Wenger could probably visit India as well. So if I had to ask a little bit more about, we know Wenger as a coach, we know what he's done with the team Arsenal and the likes. But with regards to the role that he's currently playing, if you can tell us what exactly is his approach and your engagement with him and the team, how has it been like, and what is Mr. Wenger like with this current project?
Well, I mean, he's got the role as chief of global football development, which I think is a big job. And he's, as a coach, as somebody that kind of revolutionised football within England, really, with his Arsenal team at the time and the Premier League. Well respected, somebody that loves football and wants to see the development of football worldwide. And I think he's very, very committed to that, as are FIFA. So he's very driven. He's very knowledgeable. I think because he has the credibility within the game, that means that people sit up and take notice. And he's driving this program very hard with other people, obviously working for him and below him to kind of make things come to life. It's a department within FIFA, but he's highly committed, and I think I've been so impressed with the messages that he's put out there and the direction that he wants this to take. And this fits in very much with where FIFA wants to be in terms of growing the game worldwide, making countries more competitive, having more teams competing in World Cups, and giving more men and women. Okay, I'll go back to that, giving every talent a chance, because at the moment, possibly not every talent does have a chance because of either a lack of resources or lack of knowledge or lack of structure, a whole range of different things that I think FIFA can really help with. And Arsene is driving that from the very top.
Right. Now, if you can tell us a bit about your experience, I'm sure you were part there at the World Cup that happened in Qatar, and it was much talked about with regards to performance on field and, of course, things that happen off field as well. But can you share your experience being there with the entire team, and how was it like just talking about on field performance?
So I actually I wasn't there, so I didn't travel to Qatar, so I saw it like everybody else from a distance. And yeah, I mean, there perhaps were some issues before balls were kicked, but I think as a football competition, I thought it was a fantastic World Cup in terms of the quality of play, the teams that came to the fore. Suddenly we're starting to see other teams qualifying out of their group stages. As I mentioned, Japan or Morocco or a whole range of different countries, which is great to see. And yeah, a great final, a great spectacle from all the people that I do know that went. It was a very different World Cup. There are not many World Cups when you could actually see three games in a day. I think it'll be a very different World Cup next time round in Mexico, USA, and Canada. I think that travel might be a little bit bigger, but nonetheless, I think everybody would say that it was a very successful World Cup, and I hope leads nicely into the Women's World Cup in Australia this summer. So yeah, I think it's been exciting times, and again, for me, where, as you said before, I was in Goa for the Under-17s Women's World Cup. And I think all these competitions are so, so important. Yes, we always concentrate on the main event, whether it's the men's or the women's finals. But, we have to remember that there are under-17s, under-20s, there are confederation competitions, all over the world, which, are giving, opportunities to players to get better, to then hopefully reach that kind of pinnacle of playing at a senior World Cup.
Right, and as you mentioned, like, you've been down in India and you're also closely associated with different Asian countries. I'm sure you're also in touch with different stakeholders within the Indian football scenario. So if you can tell us how much probably do you follow Indian football and your thoughts on what's happening currently in the system here and what do you think probably we can implement in Indian football?
Yeah, so I mean, I first came to India when I worked at Queen's Park Rangers as their academy director. One of the owners is a British born Indian who is very passionate about India and his heritage. And I went to Mumbai a couple of times as part of a program to give opportunities for some Indian young male players to come across to Queen's Park Rangers and play some football. So that was my first experience, which I loved. And then more recently, I've been involved in a couple of kind of conferences and leadership programs. So a performance leadership program whilst I was working at Loughborough University with Elms Sports Foundation, which was again interesting. I did a number of workshops on that program from the UK, and then the Global Football Conclave as well, which I obviously spoke at this year, as well as attending the Under 17s World Cup. So I'm not going to profess to be an expert on Indian football. I think my understanding and what I've seen is that, there's a real passion for football. I think that the English Premier League obviously is really, really popular with lots of people, observing those games. The Indian Super League, I think, as a competition seems to be getting stronger. I know a few people that have been involved in that coaching wise. I'm good friends with AD Boothroyd, who's currently a head coach working in India. And I think, yes, it has its challenges. I think, as I said before, I think it's always difficult for countries where perhaps, the football is not the number one sport, where you've got cricket, you've got hockey, football. Perhaps it will start to grow and get bigger, more participation, which then needs to be turned into, that high performance end where you're developing academies, where you're developing, high quality coaches that can work with players. You have a big population. Yes, challenging because of the size of the country as well, but no reason why India shouldn't become a force in world football. But, it's not easy. It's not an overnight thing. There's a lot of work that has to go down go into infrastructure. And infrastructure just doesn't mean pitches, although that's part of it, but it also means the kind of, other support services within that, whether it be coaching. How do you make sure that you've got good coaches, the coach education programs? What performance support will you have there? Whether it's strength and conditioning or analysis or medical or, there's so many different factors. What competitions do you have? Whether that's regional, local competitions, national competitions through the age groups. I think it's great to have a strong senior league with senior football, but how do you make sure that your young players are developing to the standard where they're going to be able to get into those teams and make those teams better and get more game time, possibly then put themselves on a stage where they can go and play elsewhere. I think in Japan, for example, 75% of the squad that was out in Qatar are playing in Europe now, playing in, strong leagues and strong competitive leagues, and that will make them better. There's no question. Even though the J League is pretty strong, it's a good league. It's nothing like La Liga or the Premier League or the Bundesliga. So how do you develop players? You have, if you can get the top league, the Super League kind of into a really good level and give early debuts to younger players to give them that opportunity, you just have to be careful that the league doesn't become a league for older players and more foreign players. And, there's always that balance to be had, I guess. But fundamentally, you need a system in place where you're developing players, you're identifying them and you're developing them within your system that will then mean they go into those clubs' first team. So creating proper clubs that have, not just a first team, but you have a first team and an under 21s and an under 18s and an under 16s, with good coaches that are inspirational, with good support services, with good grassroots football going underneath that, then I think you have more of a chance.
Great. I think I'm sure we have a lot more to speak about with you with regards to we've not even touched upon the main big forte that you play, which is the talent identification. But I think this was the first of the many episodes. I hope that you would want to come back on our show and probably speak about only in a different and go in deep topical subjects as well. But Richard Allen, thank you so much. I think this gives us and our listeners a peek into what is Mr. Wenger and his team at FIFA level doing, and also people like you, what are they actually doing on ground level as well. Thank you once again for taking your time and being part of this show.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, to all the lovely listeners, thank you once again for being kind and patient for following our show. Please do subscribe and follow to the Total Indian Football Show on your preferred audio platforms, and big ups to Idea Blue Studios once again. Thank you all to for all your love. Continue that. We want this coming in all the other episodes. We'll once again come back with interesting episodes in the near future as well. This is the Total Indian Football Show, and I'm your host, Siju, signing off. Thank you so much.